When Paul Walker walked into the most exclusive boutique in Beverly Hills wearing faded jeans and a simple t-shirt, he expected maybe a few sideways glances. What he didn't expect was to be called ugly, broke, and told he didn't belong. The socialite working there made sure everyone in the store heard her disgust, but what she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the man she was humiliating owned the building, and in the next 10 minutes, her entire world would collapse. Not because Paul wanted revenge, but because sometimes kindness has a price, and cruelty, it has consequences. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The afternoon sun blazed over Rodeo Drive, casting sharp shadows across the polished storefronts of Beverly Hills' most exclusive shopping district. Tourists snapped photos of window displays featuring dresses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Luxury cars glided past. Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, Ferraris, each one a mobile statement of wealth and status. Inside Maison Étoile, one of the street's most prestigious boutiques, the air was cool and perfumed. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, casting prismatic light across marble floors. Racks of designer clothing, each piece hand-selected from Paris, Milan, and Tokyo, lined the walls like artifacts in a museum. The atmosphere wasn't just exclusive, it was intimidating, and that was exactly the point. Behind the main counter stood Victoria Ashford, 34 years old, impeccably dressed in a tailored Chanel suit, her blonde hair swept into a flawless chignon. She wore her position like armor. Sales associate at Maison Étoile wasn't just a job, it was an identity, a statement that she belonged in this world of wealth and beauty. Victoria had worked her way up from nothing. Born in a small town in Ohio, she'd clawed her way to Beverly Hills through sheer determination and an unwavering commitment to image. She knew every designer label, every fashion trend, every subtle signal that separated the truly wealthy from the wannabes. And she had learned one crucial lesson. In this world, appearances were everything. Victoria checked her reflection in a nearby mirror, adjusting her necklace. A delicate gold chain with a small diamond pendant, not too flashy, but expensive enough to signal taste. She smiled, satisfied. The boutique was quiet this Tuesday afternoon. A few regular clients browsed the racks. Women with personal shoppers, men buying gifts for wives or mistresses. Victoria had already made 2 sales today, totaling over $15,000. Not bad, but she was hungry for more. The glass doors opened with a soft chime. Victoria looked up, her professional smile already forming, until she saw who walked in. A man in his late 30s stepped through the entrance. He wore faded Levi's with a small tear near the knee, a plain gray t-shirt that looked like it had been through 100 wash cycles, and worn-out Vans that had clearly seen better days. His hair was slightly tousled, like he'd just woken up. No watch, no jewelry, nothing that screamed money. Victoria's smile vanished. Paul Walker paused just inside the doorway, his eyes adjusting to the boutique's soft lighting. He'd been driving around Beverly Hills after a meeting with his financial advisor, and he'd noticed this store, one of several properties he'd quietly invested in over the years through his real estate portfolio. He'd never actually visited in person. Today, he'd decided to change that. He looked around, appreciating the elegant design, the careful curation of merchandise. Then his eyes landed on Victoria, who stood frozen behind the counter, her expression somewhere between confusion and disdain. Paul offered a polite smile. "Hi, just browsing if that's okay." Victoria didn't respond immediately. Her eyes traveled from his scuffed shoes to his faded jeans to his plain t-shirt. Every fiber of her being screamed that this man didn't belong here. She'd seen his type before. Tourists who wandered in thinking they could afford something, guys who wanted to impress girlfriends but would balk at the prices, people who treated luxury boutiques like museums. Look, but don't touch, and definitely don't buy. "Can I help you?" Victoria asked, her tone professional but with an edge of impatience. Paul noticed the shift in her demeanor but chose to ignore it. "I'm good, thanks. I'll let you know if I need anything." He moved toward a rack of men's leather jackets, his fingers brushing over a beautiful Italian-made piece. The craftsmanship was exceptional. He checked the tag, $4,800, reasonable given the quality. Victoria watched him from behind the counter, her jaw tightening. She leaned toward her colleague, Melissa, a younger woman who had just emerged from the back room with a stack of shopping bags. "Look at this," Victoria whispered. "Not quietly enough, guy walks in here looking like he just rolled out of a thrift store. Melissa glanced over, uncomfortable. Maybe he's just casual today? Victoria scoffed. Casual? Melissa, look at his shoes. Those things have holes in them. He probably doesn't even have $500 in his bank account. Melissa shifted uncomfortably. Should we just let him browse? Let him browse? Victoria's voice rose slightly. We have clients coming in. An hour. Real clients. I don't want him scaring them off, Paul continued, examining the merchandise. Seemingly oblivious to the conversation, he moved to a display of women's handbags. Gifts for his sister, he thought. She'd mentioned wanting something nice for her birthday. He picked up a burgundy leather bag, turning it over in his hands. Beautiful stitching, clean lines. He checked the price tag, $3,200. Victoria's patience snapped. She strode across the marble floor, her heels clicking sharply, and stopped directly in front of Paul, her arms crossed, her expression cold. Excuse me, she said, her tone no longer even pretending to be polite. I'm going to need to ask you something. Paul looked up, still holding the handbag. Sure, Victoria gestured around the boutique. Do you understand what kind of store this is? Paul blinked, confused. A clothing store? Victoria's lips curled into a condescending smile. This is Maison Étoile. We carry exclusive designer pieces. Our average transaction is over $5,000. She paused, letting that sink in. Our clientele expects a certain atmosphere. Paul's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Understanding, not surprise. He'd dealt with this kind of judgment before, but understanding. I'm just looking, he said calmly. Victoria took a step closer, lowering her voice but making sure it carried to the other customers in the store. Looking requires the ability to buy, and frankly, sir, I don't think you can afford anything in here. The boutique went silent. A well-dressed couple near the back stopped mid-conversation. An older woman trying on sunglasses paused, watching. Even Melissa froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. Paul stood perfectly still, the handbag still in his hands. His voice was quiet, steady. And you're saying this because... Victoria gestured at him, her hand sweeping from head to toe. Because you walked in here looking like you can't afford a meal at McDonald's, let alone a $3,000 handbag. The words hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Paul set the handbag down carefully on the display table. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. I see, he said quietly. Victoria, emboldened by what she perceived as a victory, pressed on. Look, I'm not trying to be rude. Yes, you are, Paul interrupted gently. Victoria's face flushed. Excuse me? Paul met her gaze directly. You're absolutely trying to be rude, and you're doing it in front of everyone here, which makes it worse. Victoria's mouth opened, but no words came. She wasn't used to being challenged. Paul glanced around the store, noticing the other customers watching. He spoke calmly, but his voice carried, I came in here because I wanted to buy a gift for my sister. I wasn't planning to make a scene, but you decided that how I look is more important than who I am. Victoria tried to recover. I'm simply maintaining the standards of this establishment. No, Paul said, still calm but firm. You're judging people based on their appearance, and that says a lot more about you than it does about me. The older woman near the sunglasses display set down the pair she'd been considering and walked toward the door. I've shopped here for years, she said quietly, but I won't be back. Victoria's face went pale. Ma'am, wait. But the woman was already gone. Paul looked at Victoria one last time. You know what's funny? I actually own this building, the whole thing. I bought it 3 years ago as an investment property. Victoria froze. Paul continued, his voice quiet but carrying undeniable weight. I've never interfered with how the tenants run their businesses. I believe in letting people do their jobs. But today, you've shown me exactly what kind of person you are. He turned toward the door, then paused. I'll be making a call to the store owner. I think they should know how their employees treat people. And with that, Paul Walker walked out of Maison Étoile, leaving Victoria standing alone in the middle of the boutique, her world beginning to crumble around her. The crystal chandeliers still glittered, the marble floors still gleamed, but something fundamental had shifted, and Victoria Ashford was about to learn that, in the real world, appearances weren't everything. Sometimes, they were nothing at all. The glass doors of Maison Étoile closed softly behind Paul Walker, but the silence inside the boutique was deafening. Victoria stood frozen in the center of the marble floor, her face drained of color. Around her, the remaining customers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Melissa clutched the stack of shopping bags to her chest, her eyes wide with shock. Did he just say? Melissa whispered. Victoria's jaw tightened. She turned sharply toward Melissa, her voice low and venomous. He's bluffing. People say things like that all the time to sound important. But even as the words left her mouth, Victoria felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. There had been something in Paul's tone. Not anger, not bravado, just certainty. The couple who had been browsing near the back of the store approached the counter. The woman, elegant in her 60s with perfectly coiffed silver hair, set down the scarf she'd been considering. "I think we'll be leaving," she said coolly, her eyes fixed on Victoria. Victoria's professional mask snapped back into place. "Oh, Mrs. Chen, please, was there something wrong with the merchandise?" Mrs. Chen's expression was glacial. "The merchandise is fine, but I don't shop at establishments where staff treat people like that." She gestured toward the door where Paul had exited. "That young man was perfectly polite, and you humiliated him. I was simply maintaining our standards." "Your standards?" Mr. Chen interjected, his voice sharp. "Your standards of judging people based on their clothing? My wife and I came to this country with nothing. We built our business wearing secondhand clothes and working 18-hour days." He shook his head. "You just lost 2 customers who've spent over $100,000 in this store over the past 5 years. Victoria's mouth opened and closed soundlessly as the Chens walked out. Melissa set down the shopping bags, her hands trembling. "Victoria, what if he was telling the truth? What if he really does own the building?" Victoria whirled on her. "Then why would he show up dressed like that? People with real money don't walk around looking homeless." "Maybe," a voice said from near the dressing rooms. "Because they don't need to prove anything." Both women turned. An older man, distinguished in a tailored suit, stepped forward. He'd been quietly trying on jackets in the corner, unnoticed during the confrontation. "I'm Gerald Whitmore," he said calmly. "I'm an attorney. I've represented several high-profile clients in this city, and I can tell you, the wealthiest people I know are often the most casually dressed." He paused, his gaze steady on Victoria. "They have nothing to prove. It's the people trying to look wealthy who wear the armor." Victoria's face flushed red. "I don't need a lecture on, you just humiliated someone in public," Whitmore continued, his voice calm but cutting. "And if he does own this building, which I suspect he does, you've created a legal nightmare for your employer." He collected his own jacket from a nearby chair and headed for the door. "I won't be recommending this establishment to my clients anymore." The boutique was emptying fast. Victoria stood alone near the counter, her breathing shallow. Melissa had retreated to the back room, clearly wanting no part of what was coming. Victoria pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed the store owner, Madame Dubois, a formidable Frenchwoman who had built Maison Étoile's reputation over 15 years. The phone rang once, twice. "Oui?" Madame Dubois's voice was crisp, efficient. "Madame, it's Victoria. There's been an incident at the store." A pause. "What kind of incident?" Victoria swallowed hard. "A man came in. He looked inappropriate. I asked him to leave and he became confrontational. He claimed he owns the building, but I'm certain he was lying." Another pause, longer this time when Madame Dubois spoke again. Her voice was ice. "Describe him. Tall, maybe late 30s, brown hair, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, very casual. Mon Dieu." Madame Dubois' voice dropped to a whisper. "Paul Walker." Victoria's heart stopped. "What?" "Paul Walker owns the building, Victoria. He owns this entire block. He bought it 3 years ago through a private investment firm." Madame Dubois' voice was shaking now with barely controlled fury. "Did you insult him?" Victoria's throat tightened. I didn't know." "Did you insult him?" Silence. "I will be there in 15 minutes, Madame Dubois said, her voice deadly calm. "Do not leave. Do not speak to anyone, and pray that he doesn't sue us into bankruptcy." The line went dead. Victoria stood alone in the boutique, surrounded by luxury she could no longer afford to be part of. The crystal chandeliers that had once represented her success now felt like spotlights, exposing her for what she really was, not sophisticated, not discerning, just cruel. And cruelty, she was about to learn, always came with a bill. 20 minutes later, Madame Dubois stormed through the doors of Maison Étoile like a hurricane in Chanel. Her perfectly tailored black suit, her signature red lipstick, her iron composure, all of it radiated authority and barely contained rage. Victoria stood near the counter, her confidence evaporated, replaced by a sick, hollow dread. Madame Dubois didn't greet her. She simply stopped in the center of the boutique, her sharp eyes scanning the now empty store. "Where is everyone?" she asked, her French accent thick with anger. Victoria's voice was small. They left. They left." Madame Dubois repeated slowly, dangerously. "All of them?" Victoria nodded. Madame Dubois closed her eyes briefly as if summoning every ounce of restraint she possessed. Then she opened them and fixed Victoria with a look that could strip paint. "Tell me exactly what happened, every word." Victoria stumbled through the story. Paul's entrance, his casual appearance, her concerns about maintaining standards. She tried to frame it as protective, as professional, but with every sentence, she could see Madame Dubois' expression darkening. When Victoria finished, Madame Dubois was silent for a long, terrible moment. Then she spoke, her voice low and precise. "You humiliated Paul Walker in public in my store. I didn't know who he was. That is exactly the problem." Madame Dubois' voice cracked like a whip. "You should not need to know who someone is to treat them with respect." Victoria flinched. Madame Dubois stepped closer. "Do you know what Paul Walker is known for? Not just his films, not just his wealth, his charity work, his humility. The man rebuilt schools in Haiti. He funded marine biology research. He donated millions to disaster relief without ever seeking recognition." Victoria's stomach twisted. "And you," Madame Dubois continued, her voice shaking with fury, "you called him ugly, broke. You told him he didn't belong. I was trying to protect the store's image. You destroyed it." Madame Dubois' composure finally shattered. "I have spent 15 years building Maison Étoile's reputation. 15 years, and you have undone it in 15 minutes. The boutique's phone began to ring. Then again, and again, Madame Dubois picked it up. "Oui?" Her expression changed immediately. She listened, her face growing paler. "I understand," she said quietly. "Yes, I will handle it." She hung up and looked at Victoria. "That was our landlord's office, Paul Walker's team. He's requesting an immediate meeting to discuss the terms of our lease." Victoria felt the floor drop out from under her. "What does that mean?" Madame Dubois' eyes were cold. "It means, Victoria, that your little performance may have cost me my business." "Madam, I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" Madame Dubois laughed, bitter and sharp. "Sorry does not pay the rent. Sorry does not undo the damage you have caused." She walked to the counter and pulled out a store tablet, pulling up security footage. She found the timestamp from an hour earlier and played it. There, in perfect clarity, was Victoria's confrontation with Paul. Her condescending tone, her dismissive gestures, the moment she told him he couldn't afford to eat at McDonald's. And there, in heartbreaking contrast, was Paul's calm, dignified response. Madame Dubois watched in silence. When the footage ended, she set down the tablet and looked at Victoria. "You're fired." Victoria's breath caught. "Please, madam, I need this job." "You should have thought about that before you decided to judge someone based on their shoes." Madame Dubois' voice was final, unyielding. "Clear out your locker. Leave your keys on the counter. You have 20 minutes. Madame, 20 minutes." Victoria stumbled backward, tears streaming down her face now. The boutique she'd once ruled like a queen had become her courtroom. And the verdict was in. As Victoria retreated to the back room to collect her belongings, Madame Dubois stood alone in the empty store, her phone already pressed to her ear. "Yes, this is Madame Dubois from Maison Étoile. I need to speak with Mr. Walker's office immediately. It's urgent." She waited, her heart pounding, because she knew one thing for certain. Paul Walker held all the cards now, and whether Maison Étoile survived the next 24 hours depended entirely on his mercy. 48 hours later, Paul Walker sat in a quiet conference room on the top floor of a sleek office building in Century City. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Los Angeles, the city sprawling beneath a hazy afternoon sun. The room was minimalist, glass table, leather chairs, nothing excessive, just like Paul. Across from him sat Madame Dubois, her usual confidence replaced by visible anxiety. She'd dressed impeccably, as always, but her hands trembled slightly as she placed a folder on the table. "Mr. Walker," she began, her French accent heavy with stress, "I want to thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Paul nodded politely. "Of course." Madame Dubois took a breath. "I want to apologize, not on behalf of my former employee, though she should apologize herself, but as the owner of Maison Étoile. What happened in my store was inexcusable." Paul leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "It was definitely surprising. I have terminated Victoria's employment," Madame Dubois continued, "and I have implemented new training protocols for all staff, respect, dignity, professionalism. These will be non-negotiable moving forward." Paul listened quietly. Madame Dubois opened the folder and slid a document across the table. "I have also taken the liberty of drafting a public statement. I will personally apologize, acknowledge what happened, and commit to doing better." Paul glanced at the document but didn't pick it up. Instead, he He looked directly at Madame Dubois. "Why did you fire her?" he asked. Madame Dubois blinked, caught off guard. Because what she did was unacceptable, was it?" Paul's tone wasn't accusatory, just curious. "Or did you fire her because I own the building?" Madame Dubois hesitated. Both. She violated our values, and yes, I knew that keeping her would jeopardize my lease." Paul nodded slowly. "At least you're honest." He stood up and walked to the window, hands in his pockets, looking out over the city. "I don't want revenge," he said quietly. "That's not why I'm here." Madame Dubois waited, barely breathing. Paul turned back to her. "I grew up without much. My mom worked multiple jobs. We moved around a lot. I've been judged, dismissed, underestimated, more times than I can count." He paused. "But I also learned something important. How you treat people when they can't do anything for you. That's who you really are." Madame Dubois nodded slowly. "Victoria made a mistake," Paul continued. "A big one. But she also revealed something deeper, something a lot of people struggle with. We live in a world that values appearance over substance, status over character, and that needs to change." He walked back to the table and sat down. "I'm not going to terminate your lease," Paul said. Madame Dubois exhaled, tears of relief welling in her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Walker. Thank you." Paul held up a hand. "But I have conditions." She straightened immediately. "Anything. First, I want you to create a scholarship program. Fund it annually. Help young people from underprivileged backgrounds get training in fashion, retail, hospitality, whatever aligns with your industry. Give them opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have." Madame Dubois nodded quickly. "Yes, absolutely." "Second," Paul continued, "I want Maison Étoile to partner with local charities, donate unsold merchandise, support community programs, use your platform for something more than just profit." "Done," Madame Dubois said, her voice thick with emotion. Paul leaned forward slightly. "And third, I want you to reach out to Victoria." Madame Dubois froze. I'm sorry." "She made a mistake," Paul said. "A terrible one. But everyone deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes. I'm not saying hire her back, but maybe help her understand why what she did was wrong, not through punishment, through education." Madame Dubois stared at him, stunned. "You want me to help the woman who humiliated you?" Paul smiled faintly. "I want you to help someone who's probably going through the worst moment of her life, because that's what kindness looks like." Madame Dubois covered her mouth with her hand. Overwhelmed, Paul stood, extending his hand. "Do we have a deal?" Madame Dubois stood quickly, shaking his hand firmly. "Yes, Mr. Walker, you have my word." As Paul walked toward the door, Madame Dubois called after him. "Mr. Walker?" He turned. "Why?" she asked softly. Why give her a second chance?" Paul thought for a moment. "Because someone once gave me one, and it changed my life." He left the conference room, leaving Madame Dubois standing alone, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of relief, tears of understanding, because Paul Walker had just taught her something she'd never learned in 15 years of running a luxury boutique. That true class had nothing to do with what you wore, and everything to do with how you treated people when no one was watching. 3 weeks later, Victoria Ashford sat in a small coffee shop in Pasadena, nervously stirring her latte. Across from her sat Madame Dubois, impeccably dressed as always, but her expression softer than Victoria had ever seen it. "Thank you for meeting me," Madame Dubois said. Victoria nodded, unable to speak. She'd been unemployed since the incident, her reputation in the fashion retail world effectively destroyed. No one would hire her. Word had spread fast. Madame Dubois slid a small envelope across the table. "This is from Paul Walker." Victoria's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "Victoria, I don't know you and you don't know me, but I believe people can change. I believe that our worst moments don't have to define us. If we're willing to learn from them, Madame Dubois has agreed to help you find a new path, not in luxury retail, but in something that might teach you what really matters. Use this opportunity wisely." Paul beneath the note was a check, not for thousands, just $500, enough to cover groceries, gas, a little breathing room. Victoria looked up at Madame Dubois, tears spilling over. "I don't understand. Why would he?" Madame Dubois' voice was gentle. "Because kindness doesn't keep score, Victoria, it just gives." Over the next 6 months, Victoria volunteered at a homeless shelter. She worked with at-risk youth. She learned slowly, painfully, what it meant to see people, really see them, without judgment, and on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, while helping serve meals at the shelter, she looked up and saw a familiar face. Paul Walker stood in line, wearing the same faded jeans and gray t-shirt. He was volunteering too. Their eyes met. Victoria's throat tightened. She wanted to apologize, to explain, to undo everything. But Paul just smiled, picked up his tray, and said quietly, "Good to see you, Victoria." And somehow, those 5 simple words healed something she didn't know was broken. Because in the end it wasn't about the boutique. It wasn't about the confrontation. It was about learning that every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. And the least you can do, the very least, is treat them with dignity. That's what Paul Walker understood. And that's what Victoria Ashford finally learned. Not through punishment, but through grace.